In this tutorial, we're going to have a detailed look at how to create and edit text within the software. Let's just go ahead and delete that text I've created there and come over to the Drawing tab. The majority of the tools for creating and editing text within the software are located on this line here under Create Vectors on the Drawing tab. We have Draw Text, Text in a Box, Edit the Spacing and Curvature, Convert the text object to curves, and also wrap text along a curve. And we're going to have a good look at each of those options. We're also going to look at the Distort Vectors option here because that's something that's commonly used with text as well. So now let's click on the Draw Text icon and go into the function. Here you can see the form we get. At the top we have an area where we can enter the text we'd like to see, and below that we have a place where we're going to choose and adjust the font, the size and the position of that text. Simplest way we might use this, if we just wanted to take the defaults we've got there, is to type in the word we'd like to appear and then just to click in the 2D view at the position we'd like that text to be created. That's just taken the defaults that I've got here. It's using a Times New Roman font, aligned in the center, text height of 2.5, and the anchor position was picked up from where I clicked. Now it may be that I have a lot of text that I want to enter, in which case I could click on the button here for a larger edit window, which would give me a bigger space to type in. It's also possible that I have text that is already been created in a program like Microsoft Word, and if that's the case, then I can just go into that program, copy that text to the clipboard, and then I'd come in here, right mouse click, and choose the paste option to paste that text either within this window or within the larger edit window. Coming down, once I've created the text that I want to see here, I have options such as the type of font and the font itself that I would like to use. We have two types of fonts that we can access within the Vectric software. True type fonts, which will automatically be picked up from whatever fonts you have installed in Windows, and single line fonts that are special fonts that are installed with the software itself. As I said, the true type fonts come directly from Windows, and that'll pick up either true type, TTF or open type, OTF fonts that are installed in your /Windows/fonts folder in your standard Windows install. If you're not sure about how to install a font, then just review your Windows help, and that should give you an idea of the way that you might add a new font to your copy of Windows that would then be accessible from the Vectric software. I can access the installed fonts from the list here by clicking this down arrow. When I click this down arrow, it's going to show me all these fonts that I have available, and if I want to apply those to the text there, I'll just select them, hit the apply button, and then my text will then be represented by the font that I have chosen here. One thing, if I know the name of the font, is I can click on the down arrow and then I can click the first letter of that font name. So in this case, if I was looking for something like Arial, I could hit A, and that will take me up to the fonts that begin with A, and then it should be easy for me to just scroll down and find the one I'm looking for. Now, as I mentioned, as well as the true type fonts, we have some specialist single line fonts. If I choose this option here, then you can see the list changes, and these are ones that are just installed with the software, and these are typically for doing engraving style letters. So for instance, if I choose the Helvetica 1L, that means a single line Helvetica font, and hit apply, you'll see that now my text is represented by a single line, and so if I wanted to, I could use, say, a conical engraving bit in order to machine along those vectors with the profile toolpath in order to get a very efficient way of engraving text. Here I'm going to come back and select and go into my true type list again. We'll go ahead and hit apply, and what I want to do now is look at some of the other options. So we've got the option to make that bold. We can go with italic if we want. With the text alignment, that would be based on our anchor position here. So if we wanted to align to the left of our anchor position, we can do that, to the right of our anchor position, or in the center of our anchor position as we've got it here. Once we're happy with our text, then we can close the form. and this will remain as an entity that the software understands as being text until the point where we convert it into regular vectors if we want to do that. The benefit of this is it gives me the ability to continue to edit this as text and also to access some of the other functionality that we have for editing text that you're going to see me use in a moment. In terms of editing this, because it still knows it's a text object, if I select it and go back into the draw text icon, it'll remember that text and it'll allow me to continue to edit it, change the font, change any of the other things that we've got in here, maybe change the height, maybe even go ahead and add a second line of text in there. So that's very important. As I say, that also gives me access to a number of other functions as well. So I'm just going to delete that now and show you the other option we have for creating text. This second option is where we've got a specific area that we'd like to fit the text within. So you can see there, if I hover over it, it says that that is an option to draw text within a vector box. So it requires us to have a vector box. If we don't have anything selected, it would just use the area of our job setup. So let's create a rectangle here. I'm going to put in a value of 16 wide and a height of 6 and hit create, close, select that and hit F9 on the keyboard to center it in our job. If we have that selected, when we go into the option here to draw text within a vector box, now I can enter my text. So maybe we'll type Vectric software for CNC. And when I hit apply, it's going to fit that as best as it can within the box that we've created there. The moment you can see we have it set to center, we can do left and right as well within the box. That's just going to justify that, and the same options that we had before with regard to changing the font, bold, italic, etc. The bounding box dimensions were picked up from the box when we came into the form here, and they've been filled in here. I could now override those if I want and ignore the original box size. Down the bottom here we have the ability to specify a margin around the text to the edge of the box. So I may have no margin, which will push it right up to the edge, a normal margin, or a wide margin to create quite a large distance between the text and the outside. If we go with the normal margin, then I also have options depending how the text is sitting within my box to vertically or horizontally stretch it. At the moment I can see this text is filling this box vertically, but I could expand the text on the left and right and horizontally stretch it if we wanted to. So you can see the options within here: stretch the spaces, the kerning, the characters. In this case let's choose stretch characters, hit apply, and you can see how that's adjusted in order to create the new fit within the box that we've got here. So lots of different options of how we might want to use this. This can be a nice way to constrain text within a particular area if you are laying out a plaque or some kind of signage. In this case I'm going to go ahead and just close this, and we'll delete what we've created there and just generate a little bit more text to work with. I'm going to go back to my standard draw text options. I'm going to create 2 lines of text in here, Vectric software, hit apply, close. I'm going to select that and hit F9 on the keyboard in order to center that in the middle of our job. Now the way that software generate text is according to the rules of the font. In some cases that can mean characters might be overlapping, or it may be that there's too much or not enough space between each individual part of your text. We can adjust the spacing of the text within the software by using this tool here. This is to edit text spacing and curve. This process is often known as kerning, which you may be familiar with if you're a sign maker or an engraver. What this tool allows me to do, once I've selected it, and you can see that the cursor has changed slightly, and as I move the cursor over the text, it's going to give me the ability to adjust the spacing. And the way I adjust it is go between the 2 characters that I'd like to move, and if I want them to get closer together, then I can just click, or if I want to increase the space, then I would hold the Shift key down on the keyboard and then click, and that's going to move them apart. If I want to do this in larger increments, then I would not only hold the Shift down but also hold Control down, and that's going to move it bigger distances. I can also hold the control down on its own in order to move bigger distances, to move them back together again. So each click, depending what I held down, is going to adjust that spacing. So again, just to reiterate, if I go between two characters and just click, that moves them closer together. Hold shift down and click, it moves them further apart. And in either situation, additionally holding control down will do that in larger increments. When I have multiple lines of text like this, I can also adjust the spacing between the lines. You can see as I move the cursor between the two lines of text, it changes. And now again, if I just click, they're going to get closer together. If I hold shift down and click, they're going to get further apart. The same options apply as they do for the individual spacing between the characters themselves. This is a very useful function, and you'll find you'll want to use it quite often in order to adjust the spacing of text, maybe to increase the distances between characters like this where the serifs are all getting quite close together, or maybe reducing the distance such as between the W and the A where there's more of a natural overlap between those two characters. You can see it's very quick and easy for me to iterate through in order to make these changes until I'm happy with the way the spacing looks for my different characters. If my text is in a single line rather than a double line, this same function will also let me change the curvature of it and let me bend it up and down. In this case I have two lines of text, so I can't do that, but I could split this into single lines of text if I wanted and then show you how that works. At the moment you can see we're still in this function where I can adjust the spacing. To go out of that, I can either click on the selection mode arrow or I could hit the escape key on the keyboard. Now what I could do is select this text, and if I right mouse click, you'll see in the menu here that we have the option to break text block into lines. If I click on that, it's going to still retain this as individual pieces of text, so it's not going to convert it to regular vectors, but what it will do is break it up into single lines of text, which will give me different editing options. So if I click that break text block into lines, now I've got one entity here and one entity here. These are both still text entities, so I could select them, click on the text, or the draw text option, and you can see here that I would be able to edit that now if I wanted to. Now, as I was mentioning before, the option to edit the spacing also lets me edit the curve. So with that selected, if I come over here and click on Edit Text Spacing and Curve, now with a single line of text, you'll see I get these three nodes, two green nodes and a white node. I can click on the white node to move the location of the text, but if I click on either of the green nodes and drag, so click here and drag upwards, you can see it's going to change the curvature. If I want to drag it down, I can return it back to its original position, click on the bottom node and bend it downwards if I want to as well. So you can see there's nice editing options for that. Go back to its original straight position, bend it up again, move its position around with the white node there. And even though I've now bent this text, I still have the options to change the curvature. Quite often bending it will change the relationship between the spacing of the characters. So again, what I may want to do now is come into here and just click a couple of times to get that V to go a little bit closer to the E. And so I have lots of ways that I can come into here and make edits to this text even after I've bent it up and down. In addition to bending it, I can use the red and the blue nodes at the side here in order to adjust things like the rotation on the curve. So moving it around, click on the red and drag that back and forward. If I hold the control key down, it will snap in 15-degree increments. If I click on the blue, then what that's going to do is change the radius. You can see as I drag that down, it's just adjusting the radius up and down of the curve that is bent around. So lots of different ways to edit this by clicking on the different colored nodes and dragging these around within the 2D view. An important thing to note is you really shouldn't start doing this type of editing with your text until you're completely happy that you have the text correct. The main reason for that is if I decide that I want to actually change the content of this text now, or maybe adjust it to a different font or something like that, then I'm going to lose this curve and space formatting that I've applied to it. So for instance, if I take this now, we come back into Draw Text, select this, you can see that it's picked that up, but if I was to change it or to hit apply at any time, then it's going to go back to being regular straight text based on the parameters that I've got set within the form. So make sure that your text is correct before you start adjusting the spacing, curvature, or fitting it to curves or distorting it. If you'd inadvertently made this edit so that we'd lost the formatting we had before, you can always use the undo to go back to the stage you were at. So in this case, if we come over, click on the undo arrow under the file operations here, that'll go back to the previous place before we made the last edit. Now, at some point, you may have done all the editing you can with the text-specific tools, but you may want to do additional editing to your text in order to change the way it looks, change the formatting or something. For instance, you may want to go ahead, like in this case, and we might want to make the S larger in the word software. I can't do that while this is still a single text entity. So at the point where you have exhausted all the text editing options, you may want to go ahead and convert the text into regular vectors so that you can use the normal vector editing tools and things like the node editing as well. So in this case, if we select the word software, I can come up to this icon here to convert object to curves. When we click on that, you'll see that each of these becomes a standard selected vector. And if I click off them and click on them, every single piece of the text has now become a single vector line. So the inside of the letters, outside the letters are all separate vectors. So now if I wanted to, I could select the S and click on it again to go to the transform mode. I could drag that up and make it larger. We could even go in, if we wanted to, hit N on the keyboard to go into node editing, and I might want to drag that out, hit S to smooth that or zoom in a little there, and drag these parts up and make any kind of changes that I want to this using the standard vector tools. Just hit escape on the keyboard, fit the screen to go back there. Again, if you have made edits like this, this is now all individual vectors, so I can't edit this as a regular piece of text. If I was to grab this, go to the draw text tool, you can see that it hasn't picked that up because it no longer understands that as being a text entity. The minute that I click the icon here to convert to curves, no longer will the software treat that as text and give you access to the text specific tools. If I did want to go back there, I can again undo the operations that I've done and change the edits that I've made here to go back to having this as a text entity. So I can come into here and click undo until I've gone back enough operations until now I've gone back far enough that that has once more become text again. A number of the functions in the software require you to have non-overlapping closed vectors, particularly many of the toolpath types. Some of the fonts will automatically create parts that have overlapping areas, and these may require you to go in and manually edit them, which would again need you to convert them to curves first. Let's just show you an example of this. I'm going to delete the word Vectric here. I'm going to select the word software. I'm going to come in to the text here, and we'll change this to what's known as a script style font. If we click on the down arrow, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard to go to the fonts beginning with B, and we'll just find this font, Brush Script. If I hit apply, maybe we'll make the text a little bigger. We'll go to 4, close, and we'll just hit F9 to center that. You'll see that this is a font that's been designed to look as if it's being written, and so effectively has got joined up letters. That means that if we zoom in, that a number of these areas are overlapping. And this could certainly cause a problem if we went ahead and tried to V-carve this. What the software is going to really look for are continuous lines that are closed here that don't have these overlaps. So at this point, if I wanted to V-carve this particular set of text, what I would need to do is edit this to get rid of those overlapping areas. That will require me to convert this into regular vectors first. So again, with this selected, I would hit convert object to curves. And now what we could do is use the merge function in order to blend these overlapping areas. All that you need to be careful of is that you don't select the inner vectors. Really, you just want to look at selecting the outer vectors in order to do this. So I'm going to come down, select all these vectors, each of these ones that's got an overlapping area, and I'm going to choose the Weld Selected Vectors option from under Edit Objects. If we click that, then what it's going to do is just merge those overlapping areas together, and we should now end up with a nice clean transition between them. In some cases you might end up with a little notch there where the font was not designed to perfectly overlap, in which case we could go into node editing, hover over this, and I could hit D on the keyboard to delete that, and D on the keyboard to delete that, hit D on the keyboard to delete that, D on the keyboard to delete that, and there, if we zoom back out using F, we can see that that's now a nice smooth transition between those letters. And now I'd have no problem now if I took this and applied a VCarve toolpath it or something else that required me to have nice closed set of vectors. So that's quite a useful thing to understand there. Anything where you've got overlapping letters, particularly in script style fonts, then you want to convert that to curves and go ahead and then merge those together using the Weld tool. Next, I'd like to look at the text on a curve function. This allows us to take text entities and wrap them along a vector. Let's just delete that data we're working with before. I'm going to create myself a simple curve to demonstrate this to start with. So we're going to come over to the Draw Curve option under Create Vectors, and I'm just going to click 4 points to make kind of a shallow wave. I'm just going to right mouse click to exit out of that. Then we'll come over, draw some text, and here I'm going to type the word software, and I'm just going to use uppercase letters. Click on the font list, hit A on the keyboard and pick Arial, and we'll make the text height for this 2 inches, hit apply and close, and just click on that and drag that in so we can see that in the 2D view. So let's come over, click on the icon to wrap text along a curve. In here you can see it says to select a single line of text and the curve to wrap it onto. So I'm going to click on my single line of text, hold the Shift key down and click on the line itself. Then you can see that the options within the form have become active. If I just take the default settings and hit apply, you can see my text being wrapped along my curve there based on the current settings we have. Some of the things that I can change to affect how this text is wrapped along the vector are to choose whether it's above the curve, on the curve, so that here now the curve is bisecting it, or below the curve. Also, I have the ability with those to change it so the text is on the other side, which is effectively like reversing the direction of the curve. So if I click text on the other side, you can see that now the software is going to consider the underneath to be above the curve. Let's just uncheck that. Another option we've got is to specify an offset distance, and this will create a gap between the curve and the text. If I was to type in a value of 0.5 of an inch here, we can see that automatically updates within the 2D view to create that gap that I was talking about, and I could specify any value I wanted to there. We could even specify a negative value if we wanted, so if I put in a gap of minus 0.5, you can see that's now going to put that text half an inch below the curve. Let's just set that back to 0. Also, we can choose the text alignment. At the moment we have it set to the middle, so it's on the middle of the curve. We might want it to start on the left, or we may want it to hang on the right of the curve. We can just choose those options there. We also have the ability to say whether we want the text to kind of follow the shape of the curve as it is here, or we may want the text to stay vertical but still following the shape of the curve. So each of the letters is now still vertically in line, but you can see that it is following the shape of the curve that we've got specified. We've also got the ability to adjust the spacing. So you can see I can increase this in order to essentially get to the point until it completely fills the curve as we've got there. So this will work with either the align or the vertical as well. So you can see that's increased the spacing there. Another nice thing with this is we do have the ability to still use the spacing function. So if I was to close this now, and you can see that really I've got some very odd gaps between some of these, we can come over, select the text and choose our edit text spacing, and here we've now again got the option to adjust the spacing on our curve here. So we might want to increase the space between the A and the R. So I can still fully kern this even though it's now wrapped along a curve in order to make that look aesthetically pleasing. Let's just hit the selection mode arrow to exit that particular function. Now quite often you may want to wrap text onto the outsides of a circle, the top and the bottom of a circle. So let's go ahead and just delete what we've been doing there. I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to put it on the center point 10, 10 and the diameter 10 in this case, so that's just a 10-inch circle in the middle of our job. I'm going to create some more text and we'll just type Vectric software in this case and keep that Arial font, 2-inch high text. Apply, close, hit F9 to center that. I'm going to right mouse click and go to break text block into lines. So now I've got two separate lines of text, Vectric and software. Now if we want to wrap this along a curve, if I've got a closed circle, there's not really any good way for me to determine where the start and end points of that are going to wrap, other than the software will use the start point of it. So in this case, the start point, if we hit N to go into node editing, shows me with this green node is at the top of my circle. In this case though, what I would like to do is really two separate operations. I want to wrap the Vectric on the top of the curve and the software on the bottom, and one's going to be in one direction so the text is up, and the other's going to be in the other direction so that the text is below. So really what I need to do is break this into two separate curves, and typically what you're going to find when you wrap text along a curve is it is better just to have a curve which is not closed. It allows you to have more control. So in the node editing here, I'm going to come over to this node, I'm going to right mouse click and say cut vector, or I could use C on the keyboard. So there, and I'm going to come over this node and hit C on the keyboard to cut that. And now you can see we've got two separate vectors. If I hit escape to go back to selection mode, we've got a top vector and a bottom vector. Now if we look at these, if I go into node editing, I can see this vector is flowing from the start point here from left to right, which is what I want for wrapping text. My text flows left to right, but because this was continuous before, this vector is flowing from right to left. So what I want to do is come over this node, right mouse click and change that and make that the start point. So now this vector flows left to right and the bottom vector flows left to right as well. Now we should be able to wrap the text easily along these two curves. So I'm going to select my text, shift and select the curve, click on wrap text along a curve. That automatically picks up that I've selected valid items. In this case we'll just hit apply and that takes that there. Then I may come into here and change my selection, select this, shift and select this and hit apply. In this case it's going to put it above the curve. I want to say below the curve, and there you can see that spread that out. If I wanted to now, what I may want to do is adjust the values for that. So we might say scale text to fit the curve and then use a percentage in order to change the size of that as well. So we can drag that down so that it's only on a smaller size than going 100%. So there's a number of different ways that I can adjust these settings if I want to with the different values. So you can see the ability to wrap text along a curve is a very powerful editing function and gives us lots of options with how we can lay out our text. One thing to note here is that the software will still understand that this is a text entity even after it's been wrapped along a curve. If I was to close this, and we'll just deselect by clicking in the white space, select the word software, come back over and click on the text icon, you can see that it picks that up and knows that that's still a text entity within here. However, if I was to make a change to this, if I was to change the font, the size or the actual content or any of the things in the form here and reapply it, then it's going to recreate my text. It's going to lose the formatting just as it did if I changed the content of the text after I'd been editing things like the spacing or the curve. If we were to come in here and just, for instance, change this to lowercase, hit apply, then we can see that that immediately loses the fact it was on the curve. It doesn't retain that information. So once again, it's important really to not start to wrap text along a curve until you're completely sure that you've got the right set of text, the right font, and the right formatting and everything for it. So now let's just delete the entities that we've got on the screen here. We'll create another bit of text. I'm going to type the word Vectric. Still use the Arial font. We'll go with the text height of 3, hit apply, close that, select it, hit F9 in order to center that in the middle of our job. So as with any vector, we can select our text, click on it again and go into the transform mode. You can see we've got these handles which will allow us to do different things like come into the middle, click on this center point, I can move it around, I can click on the top one here and we can drag it up and down, or if I hold the shift key down it'll do that around the center of the part. Can do the same thing on the corners if I want. I can even come in and go on these dark blue nodes on the corners here and rotate it around the center of the part and then continue to stretch and manipulate this however we want using these handles. Now to take that a stage further, we can use the vector distortion tool, which is this icon here. So let's just go back to how the text was before just by clicking on the undo until we get back to our original position and size. And then let's look at the options that we've got with the Distort Objects tool. The most basic way we can use this is to take our text, click on the icon and take the first option, which is the bounding box. If I select that and hit apply, what that's going to do is create a box around the outside of my part, a four-sided box, and this box acts just like a vector. So you can see it's got the midpoints, it's got the nodes, and I can use the same node editing tools that I can with a vector in order to manipulate the outside of this box in order to change what's happening with my text. So now we have our bounding box. Probably the simplest edit we can make is just to select the corner node here and just use the up arrow on the keyboard in order to jog that up. Select the bottom node, bottom corner node here, and just hold the down arrow down in order to stretch that down. And you can see how it's distorting the text within this envelope. In addition to this, because this works just like a vector, I have a lot of the same options. If I right mouse click over a span, I can convert to a Bezier, to an arc, or insert a point. If we click to insert a point, I can click and drag. I can also use the shortcut keys, so I could come over here and just hit I on the keyboard to insert a point, and I can use the virtual midpoint, so I can just click and drag and that will add a new point in there. So I could do that at any of these virtual midpoints here. As well as that, I could go over and smooth points if I wanted to, so we can come over this node here, right mouse click, hit smooth point, or I can use the shortcut key S in order to do that as well. So there we've smoothed those points. I can drag them around and continue to edit what's happening with the text in my distortion envelope. And you can see this is a very, very powerful option within the software to allow me to get my text to fit lots of different shapes. When you're distorting something, it's in a special state. So I can exit this function, I can close this. No longer is this a text entity, it is now an entity which is essentially in the state of being distorted. So for instance, if I select this, I can no longer individually select the objects within it. You see when I click on it, they all become selected. And so if I wanted to get this back to being individual vectors, what I would need to do is go into the Distort Objects tool with this selected and choose the option to bake the distortion. When I bake the distortion, that is effectively saying that I'm happy to accept it as it is and I want it to return to being regular vectors, but in the new shape. So if we click Bake Distortion, hit close, and then you can see I can individually select these objects. Once again, I could node edit them if I wanted to, and they are individual vectors again. Now, as well as manually distorting the text using the bounding box option, we can also use some existing curves if we wanted to distort it in a more precise way, or to fit a sign shape or a particular area that we wanted the text to go in. Let's give you an example of that. We'll delete these distorted vectors. I'm going to recreate the text we had before. Just type Vectric and click and drag that onto the bottom here. And what I'm going to do is just sketch a couple of arcs. So I'm going to click and just snap horizontally, and we'll just make a couple of simple shapes and select that, and I'm going to mirror that and flip about the job center, flip vertical. And what we'll do now is click on the distort selected objects. This time what I want to do is distort between two curves, and you can see here I'm going to select the object I want to distort, and then I'm going to shift and select the bottom curve, shift and select the top curve. It'll tell me that those vectors are valid, and when I hit apply, it's going to distort those between those two curves. So you can see I can create quite nice effects fitting within particular curves that I've got. I could manually edit this now. It's gone into the edit envelope option, so ignoring those curves now, once I've used those in order to distort it, I could actually change that now just by clicking on here, and you'll see that's not affecting the original curves at all. Let's just close that and undo those options there. We could also distort this along more varied curves than that. If we wanted to go into node editing, I could convert this to a Bezier span. We could insert a node there and bend that. Might want to delete this. I could take that vector, could mirror that, flip vertical, and then instead of creating a mirrored copy, I'm just going to flip that horizontally. So now we've got this kind of interesting wave. Again, we'd select the object, shift and select the two curves, go into the distortion tool, choose the between two curves option and hit apply, and now that's being distorted along those two curves there. You can see here though, because of the direction of the bottom curve, it's actually reversed from how I would like that. The only way I can really alter that is to close this, hit Ctrl Z, click on here, go into node editing, and right mouse click on that point and change that to make it the start point. Now I should find, if I've got that, both those curves flowing in the right direction, we can select that, shift and select the two curves, bottom first, top second, distort selected objects, between two curves, hit apply, and now it's doing it in the direction I expected it to. Again, once I've applied it to the curves, I can go in here and manually edit it, and it will just ignore the curves, and I can make any edits I want in the same way I could when I was using the standard edit envelope options. If we close that, let's just delete those two vectors there. So you can see the distortion tools are a really powerful way for me to make edits to text in order to create effects for different types of applications. So that concludes this quite lengthy tutorial. Hopefully you've seen here just how powerful the options are within the software for creating and editing text, and the many ways that you can adjust the text in order to work for the type of design that you're doing.